All right, here we go. This is the first, snippet that I'm calling Ethan's Excited. This is kind of it's a minor extension, more candid version of the Reason for Hope podcast. I should probably, right at the beginning here, make the disclaimer that Garren is absolutely not involved in this whatsoever. The opinions of the host of this program do not necessarily reflect the views and or beliefs of Garren from the Reason for Hope podcast. Garren is not responsible for the tone or statements made on Ethan's Excited and should be considered independent, blah, 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 blah. He's not responsible or involved. In fact, this grew out of a conversation I had with him where I really want to do this and he is occupied with other important activities, so I am taking it upon myself to put this out there, put myself out there, I guess, as it were. And I'm going to call these little snippets of pure truth, Ethan is Excited. I like that. Snippets of pure truth. So that's what this is going to be. I'll have these from time to time, kind of upload them along with different podcast episodes, and it'll be on a random topic that may or may not be attached to the episode. It may not have anything to do with it, like tonight. The episode that we are about to record is another one of the False Gospels episodes, but this has absolutely nothing to do with that. This has more to do with an issue in society that I've observed and would like to give my 2 cents worth on. So tonight, Ethan is, excited. A better word for that would be Ethan is agitated. And in rare form, I think, a little bit, and that may or may not be a good thing, but just in order to put myself out there, let me say that as a conservative, I personally am not always a very big fan of the Washington Post. But every so often, though, I read or I hear about an article that they write, whether, it's a news piece or an editorial or whatever, and I read it and it make me think that there's someone at that paper who really knows their stuff. So I may be biased, but I'm not too thick-headed to admit that when it's true. So earlier this week, I stumbled upon an old editorial piece written by a woman named Petula Dvorak. I hope that's how that name's pronounced. And that was one of those articles that made that thought pop into my already overstuffed head. But before I get into the details of that article, I want to lay some foundation for this bit, and I want to make sure that if there are children who are listening to this, that there is going to be some content in this that you may not want anyone under 13, between 13 and 15 to listen to this. So just that fair warning for that. This is serious content coming up. So I am a teacher, a language arts teacher, and as teachers, my fellow teachers and I are responsible for the education of the next generation. This requires us to spend significant time and energy investing big parts of our lives into helping our students succeed, which is one of the reasons I became a teacher in the first place. Our lives intertwine with the lives of our students day in and day out, and we come to know many of them on a very personal level as we see them progress over the months and in many cases, if we are blessed enough, over the years into the people that God will eventually create them to be, or sanctify them to be, as it were. But because we spend so much time with them in so many various situations, our position and our duties basically require the students and their parents and, society in general to trust us with the well-being of those students while they are in our care. That applies when they come into the school property, and it also applies in the individual classrooms. And in almost no other scenario, I think, would apparently willingly give up their children to other adults who, in most cases, they don't even know all that well. For a large portion of the day, we have their children, and we may or may not have even met these adults before. And yet, we have custody of their children for, if you measure out the time that the children are in school versus the time they're home with their parents, we probably have the majority of these children for more time during the school year than their parents do, assuming that they sleep regular hours. So this, especially with me as a first-year teacher this past year, there are a vast number of students in that building who get to know me far better than their parents ever will. And so this means that parents are either really good at assuming they're best or they're complete fools, because parents who send their children to public or private school trust that we as the educators have the character and self-control to behave responsibly and appropriately towards their children. That is a huge assumption to make. because they expect that we understand our role in their lives and that we won't cross the line that exists between the teacher and the student, because we are professionals who are held to a higher standard because of the position that we occupy in society. This is why there is no greater betrayal of trust than when a high school or elementary teacher engages in a sexual relationship with one of their students. This has been a soapbox for me for years, way before I became a teacher. So this is going to be something that I hit as hard as I possibly can. So Dvorak wrote in her editorial on the situation involving Molly Shattuck, the 47-year-old woman who seduced her son's 15-year-old classmate. Now, Shattuck is not a teacher, and of course, regardless of her possible dreams in the future, it'll never happen, thank the Lord. But Dvorak's article was replete with examples of female teachers who have indulged in criminal behavior with their students. Now, this is a quote from the article. It was just 2 weeks ago that a 22-year-old substitute teacher at a D.C. charter school was arrested for allegedly performing oral sex on a 17-year-old student during her first day on the job. Her first day on the job. Now, this is one of the things that I had to kind of come to grips with about this profession. When I was in my undergrad studies at Rite State, and I informed my coworkers at the hospital, I was a janitor at the time, and I informed my fellow janitors what I was going to school for. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a high school English teacher. They all, not all, but a fair amount of them immediately busted out you want to have sex with all those high school teenage girls. That's what you want. That's what you're doing this for. And I was extremely offended at the time, because I couldn't fathom the mindset of someone who goes into education specifically for this reason. Now, I'm not saying that this 22-year-old substitute at the DC charter school who did this on her first day did that. I'm not saying that's why she became a substitute teacher, but for you to become a substitute teacher at 22 years old and do this on your first day, that says something. That says something huge. The article goes on. In September and October alone, 2 teachers were arrested on charges of having sex with a student in an apartment outside New Orleans. A teacher in New Jersey was accused of having sex with students in her car, and a teacher in Connecticut was booked after allegedly threatening to fail a student for trying to stop the sex they had been having since the summer, unquote. So while I was on the subject, I realized, if you're listening, take a breath, because that's ridiculous. That just in that one paragraph alone, that's enough to make you not sleep at night as a parent. But while I was here, I realized that the past several years have seen a huge spike in the reported instances of specifically female teachers caught with students of both genders. Now, I don't know completely why this is. It may be because there are far more female teachers in general than there are male teachers, but I don't remember hearing about this as much as I do now. If this has been going on this long, it has taken us as a society quite a while to start hearing about it, start reporting it. And we can talk about what, gender differences in reporting and whatnot. I don't know, but it struck me as strange. But it could be that's being reported on a more regular basis now. But for whatever reason, our culture at the moment seems to be focused on the apparent upswing in female teacher sexual misconduct. In fact, and this was the big surprise of my day the other day. When I tried to look for articles online from various news sources, I kept getting only female teacher stories. Even when I typed in male teacher sex crimes, the majority of my hits were still solely about female teachers. That's really strange. And rather than try to figure out if this is because there's more of this than there used to be, I think this is an example of a terrible thing that has become an object of our culture's morbid tendency to be fascinated by the newest perversion of something good. 10 years ago, these headlines would have been dominated by male teachers who had been abusing their position with female students, but now it's the reverse. Now, of course, that doesn't mean I couldn't find reports of both genders abusing their teacher roles. Here's some headlines about all this different stuff. Dater high school teacher arrested for having sexual conduct with student. Morgan Hill 5th grade teacher arrested on suspicion of sexually assaulting student. Local teacher arrested accused of trying to solicit sex from teen girl. New Jersey teacher reportedly asked male students, this is the gross one. So again, children, make sure you're appropriately aged. New Jersey teacher reportedly asked male students to bring in semen-stained tissues to class so that he could make art projects with them. New York Teachers Union fighting for the pension of a convicted pedophile teacher. Now that last one takes the cake for me. It's not enough that the teacher abused his position and abused the students. Now his union is furthering the betrayal by trying to lessen the consequences that the state is justly imposing on him, as if enough damage hasn't been done already. The only thing that any of these teachers should have earned for themselves is a one-way ticket to prison. I would prefer a life sentence, assuming our justice system still works like it should. And of course, the list, when you look at these online, it just goes on and on and on. Now, look, I know that I am not, in any remote sense of the word, a veteran in the educational career field. I know that I am a brand new, young, fresh out of college, juvenile know-it-all who likes to have opinions and spout off, ultimate truth to the world. But I don't think that I am stepping too far out of line when I tell the teachers of America that this is unacceptable. I think if you are a teacher, a licensed professional, I think you likely agree with what I just said. I would hope, at least, that you agree with what I just said. I doubt, and again, I want to make room for the caveats, but I doubt that there are any teachers today who would openly proclaim that they are in an illicit relationship with their student or students. This sort of thing happens in secret because it is a heinous crime. It's also not discussed a whole lot because it's understood that teachers who exhibit this behavior are a gigantic stain of shame on our nation's educational system. Now, I'm not saying that it's exclusive to the public school arena, but it happens. If you look at statistics, it is way more prevalent in public schools. There is literally no excuse for this sort of crime. Pedophilia and statutory rape are bad enough when committed by private individuals, but it is something uniquely terrible when a public employee entrusted with the education and welfare of our children, supposedly held to a higher standard voluntarily, it is something especially bad when it sinks this low. These are base, evil acts that cause more harm to students in 15 or 20 minutes or however long this sort of crap takes than most forms of high school bullying could in all 4 years of your high school career. And these people dare to call themselves teachers. You know what? I take it back. They're teaching something. They're teaching the people of their community to despise public education, for one. And frankly, I can't say that the public is wrong. Now, with the multitude of the examples I just gave, just by themselves, not to mention all of the rest of the issues with public education. I mean, to lump this on top of the rest of the public education issues kind of makes you understand why there's been an upswing in homeschooling and private education and all that sort of thing. It makes a whole lot more sense in light of that. And for me, it's just one more reason why, if I ever were to have any children, I have a hard time believing that I would ever want to send them to a public school. I would vastly prefer to homeschool them if I had the choice. And I say that as someone who works in a private school and who got his education planning to be a public school teacher and did all my internships and stuff in public schools. I mean, if I were teaching in a public school right now, I'd still be saying the same thing. I would prefer to have my children homeschooled, at least for their elementary and middle school years. We can talk about pedagogy and constructivist versus transmission modes of instruction, social cognitive learning theory, and all those other things that good teachers need to learn before they get into the classroom, but all of that is completely meaningless if we can't even ensure that teachers will use common sense to figure out basic things like, how not to have sex with their students. If there was ever a teacher at the school where I'm employed who doesn't seem to understand this, then first of all, I hope that I would not know about it, because we would have an interesting interaction if I did. And I would definitely expect the administration and the local authorities to conduct a full investigation and then put said teacher away as long as he or she is guilty. And I would think that the parents of the student or students harmed by the teacher's actions would deserve that closure at the very least. And it's also why when I, as especially a young single male brand new teacher, am so hung up on this issue of accountability in my classroom. I want to be accountable. It's not a weakness. It is an important strength. It is like a CYA, if I can use such a crass term. It is extremely important. It's why when my department chair looks at me and says, I want you to be better in view of the door. I want you to do this better. I want you to do that better. Even if it sounds ridiculous to others, I sit up, I pay attention, because that stuff matters. It matters because I want to stay as far away from this as I possibly can. I would say that that's also a reason why I make the distinction between myself and the students so very clear. Students need to understand that I am not their friend. That may be shocking to some people, but that needs to be an understood thing in my classroom between me and my students. I've sat in rooms where I'll hear students say, "Oh, Mr. Baumgartner, I think you might be my best friend in this school." And I'll say to them very clearly in no uncertain terms, "No, actually, I'm not your friend. I'm your teacher." And of course, they give you those puppy dog eyes. "Why, Mr. Baumgartner, that's so mean. That's so terrible." And yeah, it might sound mean or terrible, but that's how it is. If you can't determine the line between yourself as a teacher and your students and make that extremely clear, you are missing one of the fundamental things it takes to be a good teacher, a real teacher. You will automatically lose respect. You will lose disciplinary privileges, I guess. You will lose a lot of what it takes to be in control of a classroom. And yes, you do need to be in control of your classroom. Even, there are people who say, you need to let the students discover these things for themselves. Well, you know what? The students who went to bed with their teachers, I'm certain they discovered some things for themselves. Now, I've been criticized for insisting that students call me by my last name for some reason. I've been criticized for refusing to get a fist bump or high five some of my students instead of shaking their hand, not letting my students have physical contact with me whatsoever, other than, a said handshake. I've been, called stiff. I've been called uptight. I've been called all those things, but I would rather be on the formal extreme of the spectrum because, for one, I'm actually setting an example of professionalism for my students, and two, at least I can be sure that I am staying as far away from betraying my students and their families and society as possible. Yeah, I would much rather be that way instead. I'd much rather be criticized for that than be in jail and fired and removed from a classroom. And there is that selfish part of me that wants to keep my teaching license, that part of me that does that thing called foresight, which reminds me that if I do this, I will lose my job, never be able to teach again, and probably lose the respect of my family, my friends, my church, and pretty much every other member of society, except for the pedophiles. And the pedophiles are not a group that I want to coddle to. So yeah, little things like that. Mature, responsible, self-controlled adults typically think this way, even if they don't have that foundational value system that tells them that having sex with their underage students is both legally and morally wrong. So yeah, that's my bit of rambling on that. My goal with this is maybe just to, raise awareness, I guess, and to make the stance clear, but I would like it that if my example inspired teachers to set an example for the rest of society in how to avoid this sort of betrayal instead of becoming prime examples of it. And I just hope that wherever I am hired as a teacher, where I am now, and wherever I end up in the future, if I end up leaving, regardless of the climate or the school or the community, I hope that I will stand and as just that kind of example. I pray, that is my prayer as a teacher, that I will be an example of proper restraint, this distinction between teacher and student, and I don't do it just for my own good, but for the good of all of my future students and the other teachers that I work with. I don't think it's too much to insist that all other teachers provide the same example wherever they are. And that's why Ethan is excited tonight. Thanks for listening.